On July 4, 1826, an old man lay dying in a small farmhouse in Massachusetts. He was 90 years old. He had signed the Declaration of Independence exactly 50 years earlier, to the day. His last words were, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." He was wrong. Thomas Jefferson had died 5 hours earlier, 500 miles away in Virginia, on the exact same day, the exact same holiday, the 50th anniversary of the nation they built together. And it gets stranger, because 5 years later, on July 4, 1831, a third founding father would die on Independence Day too. The statistical probability of this happening? 1 in 200,000. This is the strangest story in American history, and no one is teaching it in schools. To understand why this story is so haunting, you have to understand who these two men actually were. John Adams, short, stocky, a lawyer from Massachusetts. Fiery, opinionated, deeply religious. A man who once said of himself, "I am obnoxious, suspected, and unpopular." Thomas Jefferson, tall, elegant, a wealthy plantation owner from Virginia, soft-spoken, a philosopher who could speak 6 languages and design his own house. On paper, they had nothing in common. But in 1776, in a hot, humid room in Philadelphia, these two men sat on a 5-member committee to draft the most important document in American history. It was Adams who insisted Jefferson do the writing. Jefferson protested. Adams pushed back with these exact words, "You can write 10 times better than I can." For 17 days in June, Jefferson wrote. Adams read every draft. They argued, they edited, they rewrote. And on July 2, 1776, the Continental Congress voted for independence. 2 days later, on July 4th, they approved the final wording of Jefferson's document, the Declaration of Independence. These two men, the philosopher and the fighter, had just given birth to a nation together. And then, they became enemies. The betrayal came in 1796. John Adams was elected the 2nd President of the United States. Under the rules of that time, the runner-up became Vice President. That runner-up was Thomas Jefferson. For 4 years, they sat next to each other at the top of the American government. And they hated it. Adams believed in a strong central government. Jefferson wanted power in the hands of farmers and states. Adams admired Britain. Jefferson idolized revolutionary France. Their fight became personal, vicious, public. In the election of 1800, Jefferson ran against his own president, and when he won, Adams didn't attend his inauguration. He left Washington in the middle of the night. The friendship that built America was dead. For 12 years, they didn't speak. Not a single letter, not a single word. Two of the most important men in the country, who had once written the Declaration of Independence together, refused to acknowledge each other's existence, until a mutual friend named Benjamin Rush decided to do something about it. And what happened next produced one of the greatest correspondences in human history. On January 1, 1812, John Adams, now 76 years old, sat down at his desk in Massachusetts and wrote a short letter to Thomas Jefferson in Virginia. It began simply, "As you are a friend to American manufacturers under proper restrictions, I take the liberty of sending you 2 pieces of homespun." Jefferson replied within days, warmly, cautiously. And what followed was 158 letters exchanged over the next 14 years. Letters about philosophy, about religion, about the nature of freedom, about their dead wives, about their fears of death. Adams once wrote, "You and I ought not to die before we have explained ourselves to each other." Jefferson replied, "Crippled wrists and fingers make writing slow and laborious, but while writing to you, I lose the sense of these things." These weren't just letters between two old men. They were the last words of the American Revolution, being spoken to itself. And both men, in their final years, seemed to sense something. They were racing to say everything before one of them died. Neither could have imagined how their story would actually end. By the spring of 1826, both men knew they were dying. Thomas Jefferson was 83, bedridden at Monticello, his beloved Virginia estate. He was drowning in debt. He would die owing $107,000, roughly $3 million in today's money. His body was failing. Kidney disease, chronic diarrhea. He could barely eat. John Adams was 90, living in the same small farmhouse in Quincy, Massachusetts, where he'd been born. He was blind. He couldn't hold a pen anymore. He needed help walking. But both men had a goal, just one: to live to see July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the document they had written together half a century earlier. In June, Jefferson was invited to speak at the Washington, D.C. celebration. He declined. He was too sick to travel. But he sent a letter instead, his final public words. He wrote, "May it be to the world what I believe it will be, the signal of arousing men to burst the chains under which monkish ignorance and superstition had persuaded them to bind themselves." Adams, too weak to write, dictated a toast for his own town's celebration. Independence forever. Two men, 500 miles apart, dying, fighting time, fighting their bodies, for one date. And then, on July 3rd, 1826, the impossible began. On the night of July 3rd, 1826, Thomas Jefferson lay in his bed at Monticello. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Around 7 p.m., he opened his eyes and asked his doctor a single question: "Is it the 4th?" The doctor lied. He said yes. Jefferson smiled and closed his eyes again. But he held on. Through the night, hour after hour, his breathing shallow. His grandson, Thomas Jefferson Randolph, sat at his bedside. Then, at 10 minutes past noon on July 4th, 1826, Thomas Jefferson exhaled his last breath. He had made it. He had lived to see the 50th anniversary of the nation he wrote into existence. 500 miles to the north, in Quincy, Massachusetts, John Adams was fighting his own final battle. He had been unconscious most of the day. Around noon, the exact moment Jefferson died, Adams stirred. His family gathered around him. His son, John Quincy Adams, was in Washington, serving as the 6th President of the United States. Adams opened his eyes. His lips moved. His family leaned in to hear his final words. Only two came out clearly. Thomas Jefferson still survives. He was wrong. But how could he have known? There were no telephones, no telegraphs, no cars. A message from Virginia to Massachusetts took days. At 6:20 p.m. on July 4th, 1826, 5 hours after Jefferson, John Adams died. The two authors of the Declaration of Independence, dead within hours of each other, on the exact 50th anniversary of the document they wrote together. It was 4:30 in the afternoon when Adams spoke his final words about his old friend. He didn't know Jefferson was already gone. Or did he? News of the deaths spread slowly across America, by horseback, by newspaper, by word of mouth. When people finally learned that Adams and Jefferson had died on the same day, the 50th anniversary of independence, the country went into a kind of spiritual shock. Church bells rang, sermons were preached, newspapers called it a visible and palpable manifestation of divine favor. Daniel Webster, the greatest orator of the era, delivered a eulogy in Boston that lasted 2 hours and 15 minutes. 10,000 people came to hear it. John Quincy Adams, the president, the son of one of the dead men, wrote in his diary, "The time, the manner, the coincidence are visible and palpable marks of divine favor." Even the skeptics couldn't explain it. Thomas Jefferson himself, a man of pure reason, had once written that he didn't believe in miracles, and yet his own death was becoming one. But America hadn't seen the strangest part of the story yet, because 5 years later, the impossible would happen again. James Monroe was the 5th President of the United States, the last of the Founding Father presidents, a veteran of the Revolutionary War, a friend of Jefferson, a protege of Adams. By 1831, he was 73 years old, broke, sick, living with his daughter in New York City. His wife had recently died. His health collapsed. On July 4, 1831, exactly 5 years after Adams and Jefferson, James Monroe died, the 5th American president, dead on Independence Day, the same day 2 of his predecessors had died. 3 of the first 5 presidents of the United States, all dead on July 4th. Statisticians have calculated the odds. The probability of any single president dying on any specific day is roughly 1 in 365. The probability of 3 of the first 5 presidents dying on the same specific day, the anniversary of the Declaration they helped create, roughly 1 in 200,000. That's 0.0005%. Historians, mathematicians, and philosophers have argued about this for nearly 200 years. Coincidence? Willpower? Divine design? Some doctors have suggested a psychological phenomenon called the anniversary effect, that terminally ill patients can, through sheer will, delay their death until a meaningful date. Others believe it's pure statistical noise. But there's one more piece to the story, and it might be the strangest of all. In 1872, a boy was born in a small farmhouse in Plymouth Notch, Vermont. The date? July 4th. His name was John Calvin Coolidge, Jr. 51 years later, in 1923, he would become the 30th President of the United States, the only American president ever born on Independence Day. 3 presidents died on July 4th. 1 president was born on July 4th, all within the first century and a half of American history. The odds of that combination? Astronomically small. And it happened. Are these coincidences? Are they meaningful? Is history whispering something to us that we've stopped listening to? I don't know. Historians don't know. Statisticians can only give us the numbers. But what I do know is this: Thomas Jefferson and John Adams built America together. They loved each other. They hated each other. They wrote each other 158 letters. They died together, 500 miles apart, 5 hours apart, on the 50th anniversary of the day they signed their names to the same piece of paper. And with his final breath, Adams whispered his old friend's name. Thomas Jefferson still survives. Maybe he was right after all. This channel is called Forgotten Archive for a reason, because history isn't just what happened, it's what we choose to remember, and what we've forgotten to teach. The Declaration of Independence didn't just create a nation, it created a story so strange, so improbable, so haunting, that even today, no one has fully explained it. If this story taught you something the textbooks didn't, hit subscribe. Every subscriber is one more person who refuses to let the truth get buried under time. In the comments, I want to know, did you know that 3 American presidents died on the 4th of July? Which part of this story shocked you the most? And tell me where you're watching from. Let's see how far this forgotten story can travel. Next time on Forgotten Archive, we open another chapter the world tried to close. See you there.